How's it going, everyone? Today we're going to make a puzzle cube for your rep class. We're going to walk you through reading the assignment, making a cut list if you need one, how to use the template that is provided for you, and then cutting, sanding, and assembling all of your pieces into your little puzzle cube. Let's get started. Okay, before we start, let's go ahead and take a look at the assignment here. So we've got this puzzle cube in the corner that we are trying to make. As you can see, it's made up of several different pieces, and there are several options as far as which one you can make. We're going to make the first one. The first one consists of a series of different pieces. Each of these pieces is a different thickness of material. I believe 3 of them are 3/4 inch material and 2 of them are 1/2 inch material. The important thing to note about them is they are inside of a 2x2 overall boundary. The dimensions of each specific piece can be seen in the drawing, so just make sure you pay really close attention to the drawings there to know the sizes of all your pieces. Now that we've gone over the assignment overall, we can take a look at some of the resources that are provided to us. There are 2 things we're looking at here. The first of which is a cut list, which breaks down the different pieces that we have to make. There's 5 different ones. Each one's given a different part name. It tells you the quantity, how many of each of these specific items you need, the overall dimensions of that part, and then the material you're going to need. So again, 2 of these are 1/2 inch basswood, the other 3 are 3/4 inch basswood. The other thing that we have here is a resource, if we'd like to leverage, is a little template. We can literally cut these out and attach them to our pieces of wood so that we can cut according to the drawing that we have. And it does us the favor of telling us what order to cut things in should we decide to lay it out in this way, both on the 1/2 inch piece of basswood and the 3/4 inch piece of basswood. So we'd make this cut first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, so on and so on for each of the 2 individual pieces. Then we would assemble our cube. Okay, so we know our assignment, we know the resources. Let's go over the materials. We're gonna need, to get started here, we're gonna need a 3/4 inch piece of basswood. This is 3/4 of an inch thick. The longer this is, the better. This is roughly 24 inches long. We're gonna need a 1/2 inch thick piece of basswood. It's 24 inches long again. The longer this is, the more we'll be able to manipulate it. A tape measure we got here, not totally necessary, but will be helpful. We're gonna need a knife. So we got an Olfa knife there. A combination square, that's gonna be essential to our success here. A ruler, also essential to our success. And something to mark with, so we got some pencils. And then finally, when we're done, we wanna clean this up a little bit. So we got a sheet of 80 grit sandpaper, something a little higher, like 120 or 150 for after this, wouldn't hurt also. But these are generally the things we're gonna need. So we're about to walk over to the bandsaw, but before we do that, quick thing to point out. Each of these is by roughly 2 inches, right? So we're gonna need a 2 inch wide piece of basswood for us to do this operation, for us to cut these parts. At our art supply store, we got a piece of basswood that is wider than 2 inches. So we're just gonna walk over there so we can cut that down. Excellent, so we're at the bandsaw and we wanna go ahead and cut our pieces to 2 inches wide. Before we adjust our fence, quick note about the bandsaw. We have selected this bandsaw specifically. Looking at the teeth, you can see the teeth are pretty small, a lot smaller than some of the teeth on the other bandsaws. We're cutting some relatively thin pieces of material here, relatively thin, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. And so we want a bandsaw with smaller teeth. That's why we chose this one. This is the one that we're gonna use. I'm gonna go ahead and adjust my fence and adjust my guard. So first thing, I wanna adjust this fence to be 2 inches. So I pulled out my tape measure and I'm gonna loosen the fence and roll this over. So the space in between the fence and my blade is 2 inches. That seems to be about correct there. I may be a smidge big, and so I'm gonna adjust that with a light tap, and that looks good to me. Now I just gotta bring the guard down. So I'm gonna loosen this knob, turn it counterclockwise just a little bit, and then I can bring this down to a little higher than the thickness of my thickest material, which is that 3/4 inch, and then I'll tighten that. That's all good to go. Great. Now I'm gonna go ahead and throw on my safety goggles, and I'll even throw on some hearing protection just for my own safety. And I'm gonna turn this on. And real nice and slow, I'm gonna push this all the way through so I can get a nice high quality cut. If I push too fast, I'll get some rattling, rough edges. So I'm gonna push real nice and slow. Let's push this all the way through. Great. So I made this cut. That's pretty good. It's gonna require minimal sanding. The faster you push, the worse this edge is gonna look. So make sure you push real nice and slow. I'll go ahead and cut the other piece. Great. Grab it from behind, pull that out, turn the machine off. Yeah, that's gonna need a little bit of sand in there, but for the most part, it's looking pretty good. Great, so we got our pieces cut out to 2 inches. They're 2 inches wide now, 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch. And so what we're gonna do is compare what we've got here to our cut list and just try and lay these parts out and then cut them. So first we've got part A. We need 1 of these parts, and the overall dimensions of this part are 2 by 1 1/4. We already have the 2 because it's 2 inches wide, so we just need the 1 1/4, and then we'll figure out the notch after. So I'm just gonna mark this at 2 by 1 1/4, and I'll use my combo square for that, right? So the way this works, in case you're not familiar, right, is there's this little lock here. If you tighten the lock, this ruler does not move. If you loosen the lock, the ruler moves, and I can just set this so that 1 1/4 is sticking out from here to the end of the ruler. So I'm just gonna adjust this here to 1 1/4. And so that's at 1 1/4 now, between here and the end. And now what I can do is I can just take this, put it on the edge there, and I'll mark that right there. And then I can extend that line just by making my combo square a little longer. And use it the same way you would use a T-square. So I'm just gonna take this line and make it a smidge longer. So this is how big that part needs to be. And then I've got a 1 1/4 by 1/2 inch size notch on the end. So I'm just gonna set this to 1/2 inch. 1/2 inch. And I'll mark this out here. And I can just drag that along by 1 1/4. So I'll set this to 1 1/4. And I can make that line there and extend this if it was a little short. Great. So that's the part that I want to keep, and I'm going to get rid of all of this and then just cut that off. So I'm just going to cut this at the bandsaw, that at the bandsaw, then cut that at the chop saw. Let's do it. So I'm going to make this cut first, right there. So that's going the long way. So I'm just going to use the fence to help me do that. But you'll notice I can't get close enough to the blade because the guard is in my way. So I actually have to bring the guard up above the blade. So I'm going to loosen it again, just a smidge. I'll move this up, loosen it a little more, move that up so it's above the fence. And then I'll lock that down. And now I can adjust the blade so it's on the waist side of my line. So I move my fence over, and that right there looks about correct. I'll lock it down, and then I'm just gonna make this cut. So I hit start, and I'm gonna push this in, and I just back out when I get to the corner, and then I need to cut it the other direction. And since I need to cut it this way, I'm not gonna use the fence to make that cut. I'm going to use the cross-cut fence instead. So I just pick this up from the little bandsaw, I put it in the slot, I make sure that it's set to 90. It is set to 90. I tighten it, and then I can put this here, and I don't want to use both of these together. I'm going to use them separately. So I'm going to go ahead and line that up with the machine off, back up, turn the machine on, and cut that little notch out. Great. So I got the notch cut out. Now let's head over to the chop saw and we'll make that cut right there. So we're at the chop saw, and I want to set the blade to the waist side of my line. Again, I want to keep this piece, so I want the blade to be to the left side of that line there, on the left side of the line, so that I can keep this piece here. So I just make sure this is at 0. I push that down against the table, back against the fence, and with an open hand, I'll pull this down, try and measure up to the correct line. That looks like it's in exactly the right spot. I'm gonna hold this nice and firm. I'll pull the trigger, go all the way down, cut that piece. Let's go. Wait for it to stop. And I got my first piece cut out. I just have to repeat those steps for all my other pieces. I'm gonna lay it out. I'm going to cut my notches, then I'm gonna cut the length, or cut it to length on the chop saw. That's about it. Okay, so we got all our pieces cut and roughly assembled. So we just gotta do some light sanding here to try and clean it up a little bit, but overall looking pretty decent. Okay, so we got our cube all sanded and taped it up. And one thing to be mindful of is which corner you're gonna cut off. You want to cut the corner off the face that is the long L, the L that's got the tiny square in the corner. And then the combination of the other shapes on the other side. So the corner in between those two faces is the one that's going to be cut off. So be mindful of that. So I identified the corner that I need to cut. I made a little 1-inch mark in pencil on both sides of the corner. And I'm going to drop this in here so that it cuts along the line that I need. And I'm going to double check that it's the right face. Once I know that that's correct, I'm just gonna hit the start button. And real nice and slow, I'm just gonna push this on the way through. There, I go all the way through. I pull my little cube out. And there we go. We got our little truncated cube situation. We'll sand it a little bit and then we'll be done. Okay, so we're gonna use the template that was given to us to try and cut some of these pieces out. So we're gonna first cut out our template and then mount it to our pieces of wood so that we can just follow our pattern with the bandsaw. So I'm just gonna use a straight edge and my Olfa knife here and cut these out. So we cut these out and we just want to mount them to our pieces of wood now. So we're gonna use some spray adhesive. This is very high strength. What you want is repositionable spray adhesive, so make sure you find some of that. This is just all we have kicking around. Since I cut them out, I can't actually see which ones are for which thickness material. And so I have a second sheet here that I'm gonna use as a guide, and that lets me know that this one is for the 3/4. So I'm just gonna write 0.75 on the back of it with something and then attach it here. And then this one's for my 1/2-inch material. Okay, and then I'll use this one to help me figure out what order to do the cuts in, since they're all labeled 1 through whichever. So we're at the spray booth in room 317 in Higgins Hall South. The first thing we're gonna do is turn the spray booth on. There's the switch over here, down. When the plunger is down, that's off. We need to turn it on, so we'll push the plunger up. You can hear it kick on. And so now that we know that this is on here, what we wanna do is grab our can of spray adhesive, which I have out of frame, and give this a good shake. And before I even paint this, I wanna make sure that my model is completely inside of the booth. I never wanna do something like this where I'm spraying outside of the booth. I always wanna spray on the inside of the booth. So I push it as far back in there as I can and give this a nice shake. And we're just gonna give this a light coat, a light little dousing. I can do a little test off in the corner. That seems okay. So I'll do a little dousing there. That's more than enough for what I need. And then I can take my little pieces of paper and do my best to mount them on here as precisely as possible. I'll give them a nice push down so that they stick on there nice and evenly. And I'll do the same thing with the other one. Push them down. And you want to make sure you never leave anything in here. You always clean up after yourself. So we're going to take our can with us, we're going to take our models with us, and we're going to do our best to clean up the general area before we leave. and turn off the spray booth after everything has off gas. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off. Right, ready to cut. So since we've got our piece mounted here, we can go ahead and cut this out. We're just gonna do our best to follow the order that is listed here. So this will be our first cut, then we'll make our second cut, so on and so forth. We just follow the order of the cuts here. We'll show you how to do a few of them. So I'll set this to the side. And this first cut is going across. So I'm gonna use a miter gauge. So I pull the miter gauge over, I set this up, and I'm gonna cut this here, right along that dotted line. Line it up, hit the start button. Right, my second cut is here. Back out. My third cut is here. So I'm hitting this. Now I'm hitting the fence. I have to bring this up. So loosen that. Bring this up a smidge. Walk it down. Great. I could have even moved over a smidge more. Great. And then I'll do my fourth cut. Awesome. We got a piece there. We just continue following the order on the sheet until we cut all the pieces out.